Oncology Asia series. Today we have yet another interesting topic of discussion, which is managing lung cancer in the era of precision medicine and Asian perspective. And an exciting panelists, which is spread over 6 countries, including India, to lead the discussion and moderating the discussion. We have Dr. Nirmal Raut. Dr. Nirmal Raut is a consultant medical and radiation oncologist from Jupiter Hospital and Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai. The other panelists, we have Dr. Annelien Cornell, who is the Director, Cancer Infusion Center at the University of Perpetual Health in Philippines. Dr. Mustafa Aziz Sumon, who is the HOD of Oncology at Kurmitolo General Hospital in Bangladesh. Dr. Sudeep Shrestha, Senior Consultant Medical Oncologist and Executive Chairman of Nepal Cancer Hospital and Research Center, Kathmandu, Nepal. Dr. Zul Mohammed, Consultant Medical Oncologist at the Pantai Hospital in Malaysia. Dr. Sachini Rasanayake, Consultant Oncologist at the University Hospital, Kotalawala Defense University and Sri Lanka. And Dr. Zilola Olimova, Consultant Medical Oncologist at the Vita Alliance Hospital in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Nirmal Raut, and thank you all the panelists for coming over. I would now like to request Dr. Nirmal Raut to start this session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, is my slides visible?
It's visible. If you could please put it on the presentation mode, it will be better. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So the traditional approach of chemotherapy, it is used for patients of cancer where a single chemotherapy, the conventional chemotherapy, the same chemotherapy is used for all the patients, only the drugs are changed. In that you can have an effect, or the patient doesn't have any effect, or the patient has adverse effect. So these are the various outcomes that can be there with chemotherapy. While precision medicine is trying to look at the patient from the point of view of different molecular alterations. And based on these alterations, the patients are divided into different types: EGFR, ALK, ROS, HER2, BRAF, different types depending upon the gene mutations. And based on this mutation, then the patient is given therapy, and further the patient is then looked into if there is an effect or not. So the NGS, that is the next generation sequencing, has 3 kinds of tests, which is whole genome sequencing, whole exome sequencing, and targeted DNA sequencing. Whole genome kind of sees everything it's looking at from a bird's eye point of view. The whole exome sequencing is zooming in a little, and targeted sequencing is further it's user defined. And the cost, as you can see, as for whole genomic sequencing, the cost is 5,000 as compared to 2,000 of the whole exome and 2,200 of the targeted sequencing. And the detection of low frequency mutations is not in whole genome sequencing as compared to whole exome. It might be there, and targeted DNA sequencing, it is definitely there. Now, when doing these sequencings, you might find a lot of mutations, but only a few of them are very, very important. Example, melanoma, you have BRAF mutation. Like lung cancer, you have exon 19 mutation. In breast cancer, you have the HER2 amplification. So these are the various mutations that are present in different genes in different tumors, and these are important to find because there are target therapy available for these mutations. And when you find this mutation in that particular cancer, these cancer can be targeted using targeted therapy. So yeah, so basically, if you know of this story of Arjuna was a warrior who used to look at the NGS reports, so he can be compared as looking at he used to look at the reflection of the bird inside um, the this we had a small water pond that he had, and that in that pond he would see the eye of the bird and then accordingly shoot at the bird's eye. So if we look at this image, we look at a medical oncologist as the Arjun, and these mutations in the NGS report as the what do you say? Uh, it is the reflection of the bird, and the medical oncologist then shoot his target therapy, which go and hit the cancers, which is the eye of the bird. Yeah. So with that background, I will start with this practical scenario. So 50-year-old lady who was a non-smoker, who was a never smoker, presented with 1 month history of dyspnea and chest pain, and there was no medical history in this patient. After 2 months of AKT, there was no relief, and then finally she was on biopsy confirmed to have a stage 4 lung adenocarcinoma. How would you like to investigate this treatment? How would you like this investigate this case further? So 2 months she received AKT. This is very common in Asian countries. Patients come to us after 2 months of AKT and they have no relief, and then afterwards a biopsy is done to confirm that it is a lung adenocarcinoma. So I would like to ask the question to any of the panelists here. Let's start with Mustafa. Mustafa, you are there. Kindly, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So as you have already mentioned that she is in stage 4 adenocarcinoma, non-smoker. So I would like to find out the genetic profile, whether there is any driver mutations or not. So specifically, I would try to do NGS, but here in our country, there is no reimbursement policy and people has to buy everything from their own pocket. So of course, the manufacturer should also be considered that whether she is capable of doing this NGS or not. But in general, I would advise for NGS for finding any driver mutations. Thank you.
Yes. I would ask the question to Dr. Zul.
Yep, thank you. I would agree with Dr. Mustafa. I mean, ideally, in an ideal world, we should do an NGS. At least we can see all the driver mutation. But I think given her profile, lady, never smoker, Asian, I think the most likely mutation probably will be EGFR mutation. So, but I mean, if money is not an object, a problem, definitely NGS. If not, then I'll probably do a selective panel, such as EGFR, ALK, ROS1, just to see which one is positive.
Okay, Dr. Sudeep Shrestha.
Yeah, I'm audible.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like in either scenario, we would like to know everything. But unfortunately, again, in Nepal, you can imagine we have very limited access to this molecular test. So first of all, I try to find out the patient's affordability, whether they can do everything or not. Otherwise, depending upon the patient's symptom, here the patients look very much symptomatic. So I don't want to delay my test treatment as well. And initially, we have a choice. either we go for, if there is any biomarkers with targetable agent, we can go accordingly. But since it is going to take time, like for the last few months ahead, when we didn't have this test in our hometown, so it took nearly 2 weeks plus the turnaround time to get at least one EGFR. So 2 weeks time for these patients, probably we won't be able to wait because patient is dyspneic and having chest pain. So in that scenario, what we usually do is like we talk to the patients. If the patient is symptomatic, since it's adenocarcinoma, we know the chemotherapy which is going to work on them is pemetrexed and carboplatin. Then so we talk to them, the patients, and then if they can afford, we send a test. Like usually what we do is the EGFR by PCR. So usually because doing all the tests at once again is going to add the cost. So usually we prefer to do in sequence. Like first send the EGFR first by either IC or PCR method, and like now we can get the report in one week time. So if the 1 week time, so try to do some sort of pre-medication to these patients and give at least one carboplatin this drug and wait for the agent. But if patient is not too much symptomatic, sometimes we start the EGFR and then wait for other things. So, but if the patients can afford, then definitely we give the options and go for NGS as well. But most of the patients we do by PCR EGFR in sequential manner.
Okay. Okay, Dr. Shrestha, thank you. I would like to ask this question to Dr. Anneline. Anneline?
Yes, hello, good evening to everybody. Well, for this patient, from a point of view that we see in our country, of course, if they can afford, the NGS will give you a bigger perspective or a broader picture of what to expect from the patient. But most of the time, what we do is we do reflex testing with EGFR, because in the Philippines, our incidence is around 40-45%. At the same time, we do ALK and PDL1. It takes us around 10 to 14 days for the results to come out. So if the patient is symptomatic, I agree with Dr. Sudip that we do start with pemetrexed and carboplatin and adjust our treatment along the way. If they can afford an NGS, but from a practical point of view, most of the time what we do is EGFR mutation, ALK, and PDL1.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I would like to ask Dr. Rishabh. Rishabh? Yeah? You are on mute. Yeah.
So, sir, we would try to get NGS for most of the patients. Around 25 to 30% of the patients are not able to get NGS. So we do have pharmaceutical sponsored some investigation for Alcross IHC. So EGFR, I try to get it done at least by PCR and Alcross by IHC. That is how I go ahead. So most of the patients are able to do NGS because NGS is not significantly costly now, at least in our country. We can have a targeted panel for lung cancer, which covers important genes and is covered most likely in somewhere between 15 to 25,000. And I try to get it done at least, especially when patient is never smoker, I try to do it in most of the patients, but around 25% of the patients are not able to do that. And I do EGFR Alcross at least that much in that subset of patients. And for patients who are planning to be started, means I generally start first cycle conventional chemotherapy and wait for reports. And from cycle 2, I will change based on the NGS report. I won't start immunotherapy upfront when we are planning first cycle.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Sachini Rasainika, what would you?
Hi. In Sri Lanka, what would we do? We would assess the prognostic and predictive factors of the patient. Similarly, we would assess the performance status, and as all the other panelists explained, we would do, if provided good prognostic factors and the predictive markers are favorable, we would recommend next generation sequencing for those who can afford, and those who can't, we would go for EGFR mutation assessment. And up until the report available, we would start first-line chemotherapy for this particular patient. Cisplatin pemetrexed would be my first choice.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, so across all the countries, everybody would like to do an EGFR at least, EGFR test to find out what is the driver mutation. EGFR test, once that is there, then once that is negative, then it will be another test like ALK or ROS. So this is a single gene that all of the patients here would perform. So this is the CT scan of the patient. As you can see, this is the lung nodule that you can see here, and the stage 4 disease. So it's metastasized to the hip bones, to the bones of the vertebra of the thoracic vertebra. So this is the presentation of the lung cancer. So lung cancer, as you all know, is basically of two types, small cell and the non-small cell. And small cell can be further divided into combined small cell or small cell cancer. The small cell cancer, also called as oat cell cancer, and non-small cell can be divided into adenocarcinoma, squamous carcinoma, and large cell carcinoma. And what is important for us is this adenocarcinoma. And yeah. So based on the different subcategories of carcinoma, it is divided into carcinoid, carcinoma with pleomorphic sarcoma, large cell carcinoma, squamous carcinoma, adenocarcinoma, and based on this, the molecular variants are so the molecular variants are determined basically. So what instructions would you give to the radiologist and the pathologist who are doing the biopsy of these patients? Can I start with Dr. Rushabh?
So, sir, for a patient who is getting investigated in my clinic or the routine radiologist, they are aware, but the main instruction would be for any patient of lung carcinoma, tissue has to be adequate. So good chunk of core biopsy if needed, 2 or 3 cores need to be taken, because most of the patients will require histopath, IHC, and molecular testing if it turns out to be adenocarcinoma. And for pathologist, I do instruct them that post histopath, if it is adeno, take a tissue for NGS before going for PDL1, especially if patient is non-smoker, female, chances of driver mutation probability is more, then I will tell them to do NGS first, followed by PDL1 by IHC, because I've had experience if tissue is less and IHC has been done and I don't have any tissue for molecular testing, and then I have to go for liquid biopsy or something like that.
Okay.
So main that tissue should not be issue for most of the tests which we need, at least which are mandatory. Otherwise, going and doing biopsy again is a tedious procedure.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Annalene? What do you give any special instructions to radiologists, pathologists who are doing this?
Ideally, when I ask my interventional radiologist to do their biopsy, I request that the pathologist be also present so that they could do a rush frozen section and to ensure that adequate specimens of the tissue will be taken out, because tissue is always a problem with non-small cell lung cancer. And to advise me if this is squamous or adenocarcinoma, so that if it's adenocarcinoma, then we can go ahead and do the testing for the genomic alterations we usually expect to see in adenocarcinoma.
Okay. Dr. Sudeep Shrestha?
Since we are working in a comprehensive cancer center, we have a set protocol for this kind of patients. So usually as a tissue is an issue, our interventional radiologist knows what exactly to do. It takes at least 4 to 5 passes, as you have shown in the CT scan. There are a lot of accessible lesion, and definitely we would like to have a pathologist presence in difficult situation to find out by Rose technique that to find whether sufficient tissue is there or not. And since they know exactly what are the tests to be done, and before itself we do counseling to our patients that these are the tests you are going to be needed. So all the tests, the report will come in this manner. So we do counseling the patient as well, then so that they are ready to pay for all these things whenever they can pay. And we have a PCR lab in our hospital, so whenever we want to send this lab to pathologist, there is a separate media for maximum DNA extraction. So we put that in that the media for maximum DNA extractions. Rest they do, and they know that they keep make sure that some tissues are always there, even after their morphology for IC and the IC and other molecular tests. Whenever there is a problem, the pathologists call us and tell us that, okay, doctor, the tissue is not very sufficient for these other tests. So what are the preferable IC marker, or what are the preferable molecular tests you wanted to do it? Then we discuss and we guide the pathologist, and we follow accordingly. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So, so in case if a tissue reaches the pathologist and the pathologist say that I can do only PDL1 or I can do either NGS. So what do you prefer in such cases? Dr. Rashini? Dr. Sachini, sorry.
Hi, yeah, in such situations in Sri Lanka, we do see around 40% of patients EGFR mutation, and this lady in this particular case, so it's more favor of EGFR mutation. So I would suggest before PDL1, we would request EGFR mutation assessment.
Yeah, right. In fact, in PDL1, in EGFR positive cases, the PDL1 is not important. In fact, it can be a false prognostic factor for immunotherapy. It can be actually very high, and we would tend to give them immunotherapy, but these patients should ideally be requiring basically not immunotherapy, but precision oncology. Precision oncology, the therapy for EGFR is very important in these patients. I will, in a minute, I will show you a slide. This is the same, the lung cancer initially was looked as one disease, then it came to be looked at as squamous, adeno, and other cancers. And then in adenocarcinoma, you have these particular driver mutations: EGFR, MET, HER2, ROS, BRAF, RET, NTRK, PIK3CA, MEK1. So these are the various inhibitors that we see in lung cancers. This is the same thing. This is the mutation genomic profile of the lung cancer, and this is the various mutations. For adenocarcinoma, EGFR is most common, while squamous carcinomas also it is present, but only to the tune of very less percent. But FGFR, P10, PDGFR, PIK3CA, MET, DDR2, these are the common mutations seen in EGFR in lung cancers, which is squamous carcinoma. So there was this retrospective studies which was based on the advanced cancers, which were given treatment on the basis of precision medicine. And as you can see, the ones who received the precision medicine based on the mutations found, the patients who received the targeted therapy, they had progression-free survival of 22.9, while compared to 12 weeks compared with the non-precision oncology group. And this is the graph of lung cancers. As you can see, the mortality of the cancer patients is slowly reducing down. Now, this is a 2016 graph, a little 3-4 years earlier. So you can see the mortality at that time was around 40, and now it has slowly come down. So this is on the basis of precision therapy. The lung cancer patients have found that you do NGS, and then you found out a pathogenic mutation, and you give a target therapy, then the outcomes are much better than the patients receiving just chemotherapy. So will you do single gene testing or NGS upfront? That is the question. Now I'd like to ask Zul Mohammed. Zul, would you like to sequence this patient single gene, one gene, EGFR, then L-cross, and then this, or you would do NGS at upfront?
Right. I mean, certainly if the patient have no financial problem, NGS would be time saving, as you can do everything and you can get the results in a timely manner. But unfortunately, sometimes that's not always the case. So if financial is a restricting factor, yes, it's not ideal, but I would do maybe a hot panel like EGFR, ALK, ROS, and then if that's then rather than do the whole NGS upfront. I mean, if patient have no problem financially, yes, NGS upfront would be what I would do. Certainly, there are certain small mutations that currently some of the company providing free access to medications. For example, KRAS G12C, I have one patient that have that particular mutation, and the company providing expanded access program. So the patient would benefit from these smaller mutations.
Yeah. Dr. Zilola, what do you do in your cases? Do you do single gene testing?
Hi, hello everybody. So first of all, I think that due to this patient has late stage, so I think that I will use chemotherapy first of all, and same time do a single molecular investigation for PDL1, EGFR, ALK, and ROS.
Okay.
So after maybe some cycle of chemo, I will continue use TKI blocks according the results of investigation. So that is my opinion.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So in your case, you would do so you would do a single gene testing and PDL1 testing, and then you would get the reports. But in the meanwhile, you will start with chemotherapy, and that chemotherapy will continue for 1 or 2 cycles. And by the time the EGFR report comes, then you would change the therapy. Is that what you are saying, Zilola?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. I'm asking Dr. Mustafa. Dr. Mustafa, would you prefer a single gene testing, or you would test in general for NGS?
In general, no. I prefer NGS because we have to outsource this test from outside of the country, because right now we don't have the facilities. So single gene sequencing is not a comfortable idea. So I prefer NGS because most of the patients, those who can afford, we advise them for this NGS. So for them, finance is not an issue. So I think that NGS is the preferred option for them.
Okay. Okay, great. Annalene, I would like to know your thoughts on this.
Well, we know that NSCLC is a genetically driven disease. So if our patient can afford, NGS would be a way to go. But if we want to be practical about this, if our patients cannot afford, and I guess it's a common dilemma for everybody, then I'll base my testing on the SCAT classification. So it's EGFR, ALK, PDL1, and probably ROS1 and MET.
Okay. So you would want a multi-gene testing involving all the possible driver mutations. And once that report comes, and then you would start the patient, or you would start earlier.
Well, I can start earlier with chemotherapy and adjust, especially if the patient is symptomatic.
Yeah. Okay. So here we have a case where we have sent the tissue. In the meanwhile, we have started pemetrexed carboplatin. And when the reports of the genomic sequencing are available, then we can change our therapy to different things based on the NGS report. So these are the various tests that are available for gene sequencing: IHC, FISH, PCR, real-time PCR, MLPA, NGS. So these are the various tests that are available for the various genes that are seen in our cases. And so if you're doing genes by single testing, EGFR by PCR needs 5 slides, ALK, ROS, RET, and MET by FISH need 4, and MET exon require 5, and then BRAF, KRAS, ERBB2 require 15. So around 29 slides leads to, so this much number of slides should be present in your case for having ruled out each and every mutation. Although this mutation is very small, this is also present, and we cannot afford to miss this mutation. Yeah, so in this mutation, we cannot afford to miss this mutation. So we all know that this single gene testing is time consuming, is variable, and loss of precious sample can occur in the single gene testing. And that is why we order for an NGS, where all this is ordered at the same time, and at one go, all the genes are tested. Yeah. So what do you start for this patient? So do you start the patient on chemotherapy? Did you start the patients on chemo plus IO, Keynote 189 data? Should you start the patient on immunotherapy alone? Should you start the patient on empiric eftinib or wait for the NGS reports? So this is the question that I would like to ask Zul Mohammed.
I suppose it depends whether the patient is symptomatic or not. All right. I mean, if the patient is not symptomatic and the patient is quite okay, I would wait for the NGS report. But if the patient is symptomatic, then I would start patients on chemotherapy first. And once the NGS report are back, then we can decide what's the next step of treatment after chemotherapy. That's what I would do.
Okay. What did you say is the incidence of EGFR in your case?
In Malaysia, it's roughly around 45%.
45. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, and female and Asian and non-smoker would be a very high risk for EGFR. Yes. So would you like to start this patient on empiric geftinib?
Well, I mean, I would say yes, you could do that. But I suppose if the patient is symptomatic, then chemotherapy, I think, would have a quicker action. So I probably would start chemotherapy rather than geftinib. Plus, I did have a patient who I thought it was going to be EGFR positive, but then now she has ARC positive. So, I think chemotherapy would be a safer option while waiting for NGS.
Okay. So empiric geftinib is also an option which I had posted it on Twitter sometimes to my US colleagues. And US colleagues were like, with low, 10 to 15% of EGFR, why do you start on this particular geftinib? What is your take, Annalene? Annalene, do you start on chemotherapy?
Yeah. Dr. Zul and I have the same number of incidence of EGFR in the Philippines. It's also around 40 to 45%. And if she's symptomatic, yes, I will start with methotrexate and carboplatin, knowing that you also have an activity for adenocarcinoma and ALK, and wait for the NGS, and then adjust my treatment along the way.
Okay. So nobody.
But no empiric geftinib, no IO initially.
No IO, so nobody for IO here. Yes. No one for IO alone. Starting the patient on chemotherapy and IO, is that an option? No. Yes. Start the patient on chemotherapy and wait for the NGS report. I think these are the two feasible options that we do. So this is the checkpoint blockade in lung cancer with driver mutation. Choose the road wisely. There is only one way: targeted therapy, then second target therapy, then chemotherapy, or chemotherapy plus immune checkpoint inhibitor, and later on immune checkpoint inhibitor. So immune checkpoint inhibitor comes as an option as in driver mutation positive cases way down the line, while the wrong way is to start with immunotherapy and to give target therapy after immunotherapy. There have been studies to say that immunotherapy, if it is given first, then you see PD-L1 may be high, but those are the cases where they will not respond to immunotherapy. I actually had this patient, very interesting case. The PD-L1 was high, was 60%, and I started him on chemotherapy. Chemotherapy was started by another oncologist, and the driver mutation was incidentally was negative for any targets. When he came to me after his chemotherapy, we had a trial for immunotherapy, and we started him on immunotherapy, 4 cycles of immunotherapy, and he did We did a response evaluation scan. By the time he had progressed and he had developed brain mets, but he was positive for ALK. This came as a report in the second NGS, which was done on the tissue, which was taken new tissue was taken at that time, and NGS was done. And that is why this patient was put on a drug for ALK inhibitor, which was a third generation drug. And this drug started working on the systematic therapy and also the brain. And that is why the brain lesions and the lung lesions both have responded very well. And he is almost 6 months down. So bottom line is, in the case of driver mutation, you don't start with immunotherapy. So this is the immunotherapy chart, and this is the targeted therapy chart. So, as compared to EGFR, ALK, these are the patients who do reasonably well with target therapy. And as you come down in this KRAS, BRAF is in the midway between chemotherapy and immunotherapy. You don't know what to start in BRAF cases. In MET, in KRAS, in P53, STK11, all these cases, you start with immunotherapy and then you wait for the response. If the drug is not available, is it justified to ask for the test? One, if your country does not have to pay out of his pocket, then the government has to pay the insurance. So what do you feel is, in your case, what is the scenario? Is the patient paying out of pocket or paying out of insurance? And if the drug is not available, is it justified to ask for the test? What do you do? I will start with Shrestha, Dr. Shrestha, Dr. Sudeep Shrestha.
Yeah, so this is a very, very common problem. In fact, like most of the time drug is not available and your patient has progressed for 1, 2, or 3 line, then what to do? In such cases, definitely we talk with the patients because there are the way sometimes we get the drugs in compassionate ground. That if patient can afford, then we give offer that NGS and the whole genomic sequencing, because that time we will have lots of choices. And sometimes we have found very rare mutation in such scenario, and we could access the drug by uncompassionate ground, and patient did well. So we do ask for the test if patient can afford. But most of the time it is by patients out of the pocket.
Out of the pocket. What about you, Zilola?
Yes, in my country, my patients pay out of their own pocket, unfortunately. But so I do, actually, I'm trying to do after first recurrence of disease, or resistant of disease. So I'm trying to do NGS, whole genomic or exome test. So after first, that's why, because patients pay out of their pocket, I try to postpone this whole genomic test. So that's it from my practice. Thank you.
We will ask Dr. Rishabh also, like, if a drug is not available, do you feel that that test is justified in asking? Let's say MET inhibitor, if it is not available in your country, would you ask your patient to get the test done, or you would not?
Sir, we do get some drugs on compassionate access. That is the only reason where it will help, and sometimes it helps in prognostication also. So I do have a couple of patients who got poziotinib when it was available on compassionate access for exon 20 insertion mutation. So it is, if we know it, then we would ask for compassionate access usage. Otherwise, it won't be. So that is why it is justified if we get in some fraction of patients, and if we are able to get the drug on compassionate access, it is worth doing the test.
Oh, okay. So doctors, Aniline, what do you do in these cases? Sorry. I will. Yeah.
We do not have insurance to cover for the tests. If we do have, it only offers minimal compensation. Now, if the drug is not available, some of the patients can afford to ship in from usually other countries like Singapore. But if it has compassionate use, then again, I agree with other of my colleagues that we can ask the test and ask for compassionate use of the medication. But for a certain population who can't afford, then we don't do the test anymore and just channel other expenses to other more pressing problems or anticipated problems.
Okay, yeah. And your patient are covered through the insurance or government?
No, not too much. Not government insurance for lung CA and for this type of targeted treatment is minimal in our country.
Okay, okay. So what do you when do you prefer liquid biopsy? Do you believe that liquid biopsy will slowly replace tissue biopsy? I will start with Zul Mohammed.
Well, I mean, liquid biopsy certainly have the ease of that you don't have to get another biopsy for the patient. And as all of you probably know, that lung cancer, normally the biopsy is not easy to get. Most of the time, if the lesion is either too central or the tissue is very scarce. Okay, certainly liquid biopsy would be something that I would like to use. But having said that, I mean, unless the patient have a lot of cancer burden, I don't think the liquid biopsy helped that much. And sometimes you can get negative results, you know. And if do I believe whether liquid biopsy will slowly replace tissue NGS? Maybe in the future, but not at the moment.
Okay. Annalene, what do you think about liquid biopsy?
For recurrent tumors, and if we have problems with getting another tissue, or if the patient is not agreeable with the idea of doing another biopsy, then yes, liquid biopsy might be an option. But since the concordance of tissue to liquid biopsy is around 70%, I have to at least tell the patient of this probability that it might be negative in terms of liquid biopsy, but still be positive in terms of a tissue biopsy. I'll only do it if if tissue cannot be biopsied anymore, or if the patient doesn't really want to undergo another biopsy.
Sachini, what is your take? Dr. Sachini?
This is an interesting question, Nirmal. And what we do practice in Sri Lanka, we since we don't have liquid biopsy facility in Sri Lanka, so what we do, we encourage to get the biopsy and do next generation sequencing if possible with the limited biopsy tissue. However, I want to ask from you, Nirmal, you all are doing liquid biopsy often. What is the risk of false negativity if in case you go for liquid biopsy when the tissue sample is not accessible or in such situations?
Yeah. So in our cases, we do liquid biopsy when the tissue biopsy when at the presentation it is not possible. Only when the presentation the tissue biopsy is not possible, then we go for liquid biopsy. For the subsequent biopsies, for the later on, we prefer a liquid biopsy because your answers are well given by liquid biopsy. So liquid biopsy, we try to focus to patients for central tumors, very less chance of getting biopsy. We usually limit our patients to such cases where the biopsy is very, very difficult, you know, or if the patient is not willing at all, that is the case where liquid biopsy comes into picture. This is at the beginning. At the subsequent, when the patient has the first relapse or the second relapse, a liquid biopsy does come in to picture, and at that point it becomes more helpful. Yes. Yeah. Okay. How do you select which NGS assay are you going to order? If you select an NGS assay, then it is Amplicon based or the hotspot Amplicon based assay? Is it hybrid capture? Is it DNA sequencing or RNA also? So how do you select on basis of Amplicon or hybrid capture, DNA sequencing or RNA sequencing? How do you select the NGS assay? So I would start with Rishabh. Rishabh, what do you feel?
So we will need both DNA and RNA because for fusions, RNA sequencing is important. So we'll try to cover both.
Yeah. Yes. Rishabh, we lost you, I think. Yeah. So I think I will ask the question to Mustafa. Mustafa,
For amplicon based versus hybrid capture, I think in India we have labs.
yeah, I think we have lost. Yeah,
Hello.
yeah. Yes, Rishabh. Yes. Yes. Come
So
on.
were you able to hear my answer?
No.
Okay. So we would prefer DNA plus RNA both because fusions are important in lung cancer. So we do both the sequencing and amplicon based versus hybrid capture. Generally, currently, I'm asking for lung cancer panel rather than comprehensive panel, where amplicon based is done most of the time. Cost it is bit cost effective, and for our clinical answers, I think amplicon based is good enough. Hybrid capture is more important from research perspective when we want to know more and more rarer mutations we need. So I think in India both the labs are doing by both the methods, but majority of the labs are doing amplicon based. That is what I believe.
Yeah. I would ask the same question to Dr. Mustafa. Mustafa, if you order an NGS, then is it an amplicon or hybrid capture DNA or RNA sequencing? Which one is it?
So I'm totally agreed with Dr. Rishabh. So DNA and RNA sequence both is advised, and as you could say that the selection of NGS assay that is not dependent by us. Most of the time we send this specimen and we got the report. But what I have got so far that is most of the tests are done by this amplicon method. Probably this is due to the time and probably this is the cost. But we are very much comfortable with this amplicon test report.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask Annalene, what do you do? Annalene, which NGS assay do you use?
We usually use amplicon based because we know more or less what type of genomic abnormalities we're looking at. But of course, if the patient can afford it, the hybrid capture will give you a more exhaustive results in terms of genomic abnormalities. DNA sequencing or RNA sequencing is acceptable if we do hybrid capture since it gets both of the information.
Okay. And Sudeep Shrestha, Dr. Sudeep Shrestha?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, whenever we choose a lab who are doing the NGS, we prefer the lab who does both DNA and RNA because RNA not only fusion, it also SNV single nuclear SNV also it is detected. And of course, if time is a matter and money is a matter, this amplicon based. That means probably the application by PCR, I suppose. And hybrid capture, like sometimes in very rare diseases, when we are desperate and we don't know what to do, at the end stage, then sometimes we try to have that hybrid capture as well.
Yeah.
To have a very rare mutation.
Yeah. So let me tell you the amplicon based, the hybrid capture assay has, if it has intron region, then it is as good as a DNA or RNA sequencing based amplicon based assay. So, an amplicon based assay will have DNA sequencing and RNA sequencing, but it will have a limited number of gene mutations that can be captured. But hybrid capture also has an as compared to amplicon based, it has more coverage than an amplicon based capture. So that's why amplicon based DNA or RNA, if both is done, then it's fine. But a hybrid capture, if with an intron region, this should be preferred. That is what I'm trying to say. Do you test mutations in all patients of lung cancer, stage 1, 2, and 3? The ones which are operable or ones which are were treated with radical intent, let's say with radiation, radical radiation, CT plus RT. Do you treat these patients with, do you test driver mutations in these patients? And if yes, then do you test only for EGFR? Because the data is present only for EGFR, or you test for all your patients? I would like to start with Dr. Annalene. Do you test all your lung cancer patients with EGFR? Or
I did look at the data for that, and it seems like at least in terms of the data. Early stage lung cancer, there is no definite guidelines in terms of testing for EGFR or ALK or PDL1. But if the clinical profile, like you have a female non-smoker, and since the incidence of EGFR in our country is high, I would test for EGFR for stage 2 and 3. But doing it reflex for everybody, I don't do it 100% for everybody. I do choose my patients who will test for EGFR.
Okay. Okay. So you test for EGFR and then other mutations are there. That report, if it is there, then no action is taken on the report, but you test for those. Yeah. So Dr. Mustafa, what do? Do you test all patients with EGFR or EGFR?
No, though the Edora trial comes with some positive reports, but here we are not in the practice change set of mind. Still, we are not in doing these things. But some patients ask for this test because they comes with this paper. But usually we don't practice this routinely.
Okay. Okay. So we have Dr. Sachini. Do you test driver mutations in all patients of lung cancer in all stages 1, 2, 3?
No, Nirmal. In Sri Lanka, what we do in early stage lung cancer, stage 1, 2, and 3, we do treat them radically, and we won't do EGFR mutation for them unless it's recurrence or only in stage 4 disease.
Okay. And Zul, you, what about you, Zul Mohammed?
In Malaysia, we don't test for any driver mutation in early stage unless if they have high risk like stage 2, 3. Then I might test for EGFR since there's data saying that you can start them on osimertinib, but I won't test them routinely.
Okay, so you're all aware of the Edora data, which actually showed that a 3-year osimertinib given to this stage 1, 2, 3 patients increase the survival. So, but apart from that, there is no other data. So for ALK patient, for ROS patients, what should we doing? What should we doing? We doing that is not yet sure. So that is why we don't test for these patients. Basically, for the stage 1, 2, and 3, we test for only EGFR, and that is what we have, the data that we have. So yeah, so this is the data for the genomic profile of the lung cancer patients. This is the data in early stage and late stage. As you can see, the early stage EGFR is 14%, is less as compared to the late stage, while BRAF is a little higher. Then there are more of NF1, ALK fusion, RECT, ROS, EGF, MET, ERBB2, and all other fusions as compared to the same in metastatic setting. So as compared to late settings, we have less of EGFR, maybe more of BRAF and other mutations that are seen. And that's why it's also important for us to test for these mutations. So, this stage 4 lung cancer, if it is squamous, adenosquamous, then you kind of do EGFR, ALK, ROS, and BRAF, MET, RET, ERBB2 testing, and PDL1 testing. That is our first goal. Then if the patient is a never or a light smoker, then you go for this testing. If the patient is a squamous carcinoma and a light smoker, then you go for this testing. If the patient is a squamous carcinoma and a smoker, then he would not get this testing. But then you want to still test this patient because KRAS G12C mutations, which are the latest, which are the new kid on the block, they are targeted with sotorasib and adagrasib. These are the two therapies available for that. So that is why this mutation, in spite of being a smoker, these patients will be tested for genes. And then there is disease progression. Then when there is disease progression, if there is a previous molecular testing positive, you do a gene sequencing, you find a first or third generation TKI was given. If it was based on the third generation, then the repeat biopsy is important because in first generation T790M is to the tune of 60%, while in second generation second generation, the C797S mutation, which is seen, is to the tune of only 20 to 30%, but there are other mutations like MET, RET, ROS, BRAF, and all others which are important to be known, and that is why this mutation is positive. In the non-small cell cancer guidelines, NCCN guidelines for non-small cell lung cancer, if it is an adenos CA, large cell CA, or NACLC, which is not otherwise specified, you do the molecular testing. And if it is a squamous CA, then the patient is a smoker, then you go for the molecular testing. And if you're not smoker, you don't go for. This was the earlier recommendation. Right now, the recommendation is to test for all patients with adenocarcinoma, because there is definitely a driver mutation positive. So this patient was started on Gefitinib after the EGFR was positive on driver mutation, and Gefitinib 250 mg, which is what routinely all the oncologists in Asia would do. This patient stayed on Gefitinib, was progression-free for 1 year. So and after 1 year, the patient had a disease progression. Now, do you consider rebiopsy, and how will you rebiopsy this patient? Is the question. So, yeah. So, do you consider rebiopsy of this patient? What do you do? How do you rebiopsy? Do you do an NGS, or do you prefer a liquid biopsy? So this question is to Sudeep Shrestha, one of the panelists.
Yeah, no, definitely. Again, this is again a very common scenario, and we would like to do the rebiopsy because there are the condition that is a resistance can develop EGFR with TK inhibitors. So common is the mutation which is resistance at T790. Then sometimes they can be transformation of the disease as well to small cell. So definitely biopsy should be done in such scenario.
Yeah, right. So for testing EGFR and all, we usually test the gene sequencing, but for small cell carcinoma, we test for the tissue, the histopathology. So do you test for both histopathology and comprehensive genomic profiling? What do you do, Dr. Sudeep?
No, actually, again, this is not an easy access, and the cost is a matter. So try to do still, like for EGFRs, to see the mutations, like T790 mutation or that kind of things, or some and then transformation. And only if patients can afford, we do give them the information about this genomic sequencing, and they are interested, we do send them. But most of the time, it is the simple, sometimes liquid biopsy to see this mutation, T790 mutation in EGFR also. So whenever the tissue is not accessible, we do give option of that as well.
Okay. Dr. Aniline, do you use Gefitinib first line, or would you use Osimertinib first line?
A certain percentage of our doctors use Gefitinib first line because it's actually more cost effective. And the more common mutations are usually 19 and 21. But if you talk to the patient and they feel they can invest more finances into their medications, some patients might use Osimertinib upfront, since you also have data using Osimertinib upfront. Now, if they do progress on Gefitinib, then there's the option of doing a rebiopsy. Knowing that 60% of the time your mutation is T790, then there's an option of doing Osimertinib. If it's negative, then you do IHC also to see if this transforms into your small cell lung cancer. But what we see often is a T790 mutation when it progresses in first line TKIs or Gefitinib.
Oh, okay. Dr. Mustafa, do you use Osimertinib or Gefitinib first line? What is your option?
We use Osimertinib because we have the generics, and you will be very happy to know that the prices are almost comparable here in Bangladesh. And so as we have the opportunity, we are after the flora, we use this Osimertinib. It is very easy to handle.
Okay, so Bangladesh has the option of generic Osimertinib, which is not there in many countries. So
yes.
for that,
number of generics.
Yeah. So I think that is an added advantage here, that generic is available of osimertinib, and the cost or affordable. Any patient can afford this. Yeah, I would ask Zul Mohammed. Zul.
In my country, it depends on patient affordability. I mean, there are some patients that I start with gefitinib, certainly because it's much more cheaper. But for patients who can afford, if they want, yes, osimertinib is also a plausible choice.
Okay, and what do you do when these patients recur, when the patient has a recurrence on gefitinib or osimertinib?
Well, I suppose that when they have recurrence, first things to do is biopsy. I mean, if they're on gefitinib, we'll be looking at T790M mutation. I mean, you can do that either with tissue biopsy or liquid biopsy. We have access to that as well. For osimertinib, yes, another biopsy to check whether there's transformation to maybe small cell lung cancer or any smaller, mutation. But generally speaking, most of these patients would probably need chemotherapy at some stage.
Yeah. Rishabh. Yeah. Rishabh.
I use gefitinib plus chemotherapy in a significant chunk of patient. And gefitinib, I've seen initially we were using only gefitinib. The PFS was not as good as what is shown in the clinical trials. It is around 8 to 10 months, not 12 months, 13 months, which has been shown in trial. And most of our patients won't afford osimertinib. We don't have generic available. So even if T790M positive, giving osimertinib is not very easy. So I give gefitinib plus chemotherapy to most of the patients who are fit enough to take chemotherapy.
Okay. Okay. And what do
If
you
not fit, then gefitinib is single agent gefitinib, and I obviously counsel all of them for osimertinib upfront, but finance wise only 10% or not even 10%, 5% of the patients are able to take it.
Yeah, yeah. Rishabh, in India, the Bangladesh version is available, although not legally. But do you not use that?
Sir, I have counseled and I've given it to at least 3 or 4 patients initially, but whether they are getting the generics, which are definitely generic from Bangladesh, is difficult. I had 2 patients out of 4 who progressed within 2 to 3 months of osimertinib generic. I don't know whether that was real generic from Bangladesh or some spurious one. So from that time onwards, I've stopped using generics. I'm comfortable with gefitinib plus chemotherapy. So obviously it is a personal experience, but the median PFS is definitely 1.5 times to 2 times more when we are adding chemotherapy to gefitinib, at least in my practice. So I'm comfortable using gefitinib plus chemotherapy at this point of time.
Okay. Dr. Sachini, what is your take on gefitinib?
In Sri Lanka, what we do is for EGFR mutated patients, we start upfront osimertinib for those who can afford. And in Sri Lankan government, there's a way of funding for those drugs. There's a special mechanism. And those who can't, we start, depending on the performance status and comorbidities and the age, if it's young patient, we would start chemotherapy plus gefitinib for those who can't afford for osimertinib.
Okay, and what do you do when they progress? When there is a first progression-free survival is there, the patient is having disease, then what do you do?
Then we would try and get rebiopsy. Highly likely the transformation is there, so that then we try and get the possibility of PD-L1 genomic, like we patient, those who can afford, we can go for next generation sequencing. For those who can't, we would request PD-L1, since immunotherapy drugs are available, whereas ALK and RET we won't encourage, since the drug is not freely available in Sri Lanka, as well as Alktenib is very expensive, which most of the patient would not be able to afford.
Yeah, I think after 1 year of osimertinib, the patient took 1 year of osimertinib, and after that she had progression progression. This time the patient was seen by an oncologist. How would you approach this case? So Gefitinib, 1 year of osimertinib. So has been on EGFR therapy for 2 years, and now this patient has progression. How would you approach this case? Can I ask Annelien? Annelien, how would you, approach this case?
Okay, if the patient has progressed, of course, we will consider if the progression is either brain only or systemic disease. If it's brain only, then we might consider definitive local therapy like radiation to the brain or SRS. If the patient is systemic and you have multiple lesions, usually with progression on T790, you're probably looking at either a MET or a HER2 or a RAS MAPK with BRAF. So this is the time to do additional testing to be able to figure out if you could actually add something on to osimertinib or change the medication of osimertinib.
Yeah, right. Dr. Mustafa, what do you do at progression on osimertinib?
So in general, here in Bangladesh, we used to start chemotherapy. But as you know, there are some patients who can afford anything. For them, we try to find out what is the cause of this acquired resistance. So for this, for this group, we advise for, again, this genetic profiling. So whether there is 797 or MET or HER2 prediction is not. But in general, we use chemotherapy.
Okay, so this is because 797S, the mutation after osimertinib is seen only in the on-target mechanism is seen only in 20 to 30%. The rest of the other mutations are seen in more number of cases. As if you see here, when you use in later line, or as you use osimertinib in first line, the MET amplification, it's increased. It is 6%, and if you use first line, it is 7%. While if you use second line, it is 6%. So some mutational change might occur, and later when you second line when you use osimertinib, you see around 28% cases with C797S, for which again a 4th generation drug that is lazertinib, which is there in the market, for which trial is available, for which lazertinib, amivantinib, and these are the different drugs which are available, which are undergoing trials right now. So we do test for that, and that is why we need to do gene sequencing, comprehensive genomic profiling at this case. Zilola, what do you think you do in such cases?
Yes, honestly, I had these cases very often. So first of all, I stop to use osimertinib and try to test NGS or liquid biopsy. And usually, commonly, I use chemotherapy until to give have results of NGS or liquid biopsy. Usually, I do chemo, wait result of NGS, and continue with others TKI blocks, which we have according to results. So that is my practice.
Okay, so post osimertinib, you would like to use chemotherapy and then change according to the chemotherapy to the NGS mutations which come. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting slide. At one side is the cancer, and the other side is the oncologist. Yeah. And what happens is, when the cancer puts in one mutation, the oncologist puts in the targeted therapy, and the mutation, the exon 19, then you give first generation, then you see P790M, and then but it is not the case. It can also be osimertinib, and osimertinib can lead to MET amplifications. So MET amplifications are being are treated with osimertinib plus capmatinib, which is a MET inhibitor, and that's how you make like BRAF inhibitor. Like BRAF inhibitor, if it comes, it can come after exon 19 or 20 when that has been played, or it can come after T790M, and that is treated with BRAF plus MEK inhibitor. So that way, it has the precision oncology has made the lung cancer as as simple as the genomic sequencing makes the whole profile as a game, as a chess game, where once what mutation you have done, then you put another therapy, then the cancer throws another mutation, then you throw another therapy. So this is how it has made the genomic profile has been made the target therapy much better. Yes. With that, okay. These are some slides about precision medicine, and 1 second. Yeah. So precision medicine has come a long way from single gene to disease-specific hotspots panel to comprehensive genomic profiling to exome profiling, exome genome transcriptome to multi-omics. This is the future, and this is what is covered in comprehensive genomic profiling: single nucleotide variation, insertion, deletion, copy number variation, microsatellite stability, instability index, tumor mutation burdens, and isoforms. So all these are present in single genomic profiling, and that helps us to know about it covers all the markers given in the guidelines, as well as other novel biomarkers which are currently in clinical trials. So you not only come to know about those markers for which target therapies are available, but also those markers which give you an option to test it in your molecular tumor board. And then you come to know that these mutations are present in the tumor, and that's why you can target this particular targeted therapy. So all road leads to NGS, and from wherever you come, all roads are leading to NGS. That's the scenario. And with that, I would like to end my talk with this final slide. When the oncologist and the patient both complete a marathon of 21 kilometers, who triumphs? It is the precision medicine. So precision medicine, this is a patient of mine. This is me here, and this is a patient of mine who met at the marathon end line. Both of them, we took a picture, and this is the picture, and that I'm sharing. So with that, I thank all of you, and I thank 4Base Care for giving us an opportunity and a platform to discuss all these various permutations and combinations, where some therapy is available, some therapy is not available. Some centers there is testing variation, and how different therapies can be contemplated in different sites. So with that, I end my talk, and I give the mic to the presenters. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for a very insightful session. Very well moderated, and excellent discussion. There are a few questions on the Q&A box, if you would like to open it up for discussions.
Yeah. Yes.
There is one question which asked by Arman Chaudhary: what should be the approach if both EGFR and ALK are positive?
Where is that?
It's in the QA box, sir.
Yeah. So
what should be the approach if both EGFR and ALK are positive?
EGFR and ALK are positive. I would go by the allelic frequency. If the allelic frequency of EGFR is higher, then I would test with EGFR inhibitors. If the allelic frequency is very low of EGFR mutations, then probably keep the EGFR and then add maybe ALK initially and then add EGFR later on. Or you can add both. If you are sure that your NGS has picked up both an EGFR and ALK together, then you can definitely go on adding EGFR and ALK inhibitors.
Great, sir.
Yeah.
There's another question. It's rather a
But-
statement.
but-
Yeah,
But
please.
Dr. Raut, before going to the decision, I think that the test should be justified whether there is a synchronous metastasis or not.
Yeah, yes. I completely agree with you, Dr. Mustafa, that this is a very rare instance where EGFR and ALK both are positive. And if EGFR is positive either by NGS, then you can test it with PCR. And then ALK also you can test it, reflex testing with FISH, and then consider that. Yeah, correct.
Great. So I see Dr. Vidya there. Dr. Vidya, would you like to take on the moderation of the questions so that you can select the right questions and pass it on?
Sure, no problem. So, how long patient will respond to erlotinib? Okay, the question, let me rephrase it. So, how long will a patient respond to either erlotinib or osimertinib at first line? If the patient progresses with a single brain met while the patient is on osimertinib, what is the management plan?
Okay.
Dr. Rishabh would like to answer this question live.
Dr. Rishabh?
So, as we all know, if there is some oligoprogression, we would try to continue EGFR TKI by giving some form of local therapy to that oligoprogression. So, in most of the situation, we will try to, if it is single brain lesion, we'll try to get SBRT and continue the TKI which we are giving.
Okay, then the other question is any other suggestions from the team? No, okay. So 20% relapsed cases can be KRAS positive. What about second line therapy with sotorasib when KRAS positive cases relapse on osimertinib?
Should I answer the question?
No takers. Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. If KRAS G12C, it is if a JRAF G12C mutation, then sotorasib or adagrasib can definitely be contemplated. But as you see, the response rates are only 40%, 40-45% with these newer agents. So that is why there is a high chance of not acting. And that is why you do a scan early. The response evaluation scan should be done at 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and then a decision should be taken whether to continue the targeted therapy or not. Yeah.
Then, so another question, can one use immunotherapy in first line resectable non-small cell lung cancer? If yes, then will you consider NGS based CGP in the first line of diagnosis? So first line immunotherapy in resectable non-small cell lung cancer.
Okay.
And do we require the support of comprehensive genomic profiling to take this decision on should I go with an IO in a resectable non-small cell lung cancer? Means essentially it is a PD-L1 or TMB or MSI. So first line resectable non-small cell lung cancer, it's more like a neoadjuvant approach, right, sir?
Yeah. In a first line resectable, probably they are asking that you have resected the patient and now what to do. Yeah, right. So that cases, in those cases, if PD-L1 is, if these patients turn out to be EGFR positive, then they don't do well to the immunotherapy. So I would not currently base my immunotherapy on basis of EGFR. I means EGFR, if it is positive, I would consider EGFR immunotherapy to be later on, not right now, is what I feel.
Okay. So I think most of the questions are answered, but there is another comment here. PCR does not pick up most of the exon 20 insertions Therefore, NGS becomes the most comprehensive approach to pull out all the exon 20 insertions. Actually.
Yes, I completely agree with that comment. EGFR exon 20 insertion many times are missed on PCR, and that is why NGS based assays are much better to pick up exon 20 insertions.
Okay, so beyond this, I do not see any further questions here, sir.
Dr. Vidya, there are some questions in chat box. Do you please have a look
Chat
at
box. Patient develop, oh, this is the same question. Currently, okay, this is an academic question. So the question is how to find novel compounds. So this is more on basic science, sir. How to find novel compounds to target L858R and T790M and C797S mutations. Are there any suggestions to how to find novel derivatives? It's a very basic question, basic science question, essentially.
Yeah. This is a very basic science question. I think you're asking in the
wrong forum.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think pretty much we have covered all the questions here. So
Dr. Vidya, there's a
outset,
question. There's another question which is there in chat box. Can you have a look at it, please?
Can't see that.
Don't you think tissue is an issue in sequential approach?
Oh, okay. That's a very, very first question was
Yeah.
there. Okay, I couldn't see that here. Okay. So don't you think tissue is an issue when we do a sequential testing? So I think this was extensively discussed throughout the discussion today. But then if there is any summary that you would like to give, sir, like 5 years ago, if that was the approach to save on the cost, are we still there that we use only sequential for EGFR ALK and ROS and then only comes NGS? Or upfront NGS is something which we can look forward to, provided the NGS costs are significantly coming down?
Yeah, the NGS costs have significantly come down. So if you work very closely with an NGS company, you can work on the turnaround time. You can work around the price also. So the price was also reduced down. So depending upon the turnaround time and the cost, maybe NGS can be done upfront for all your patients of NGS. So if let's say 10 days is the time for turnaround time for NGS, then why do you wait for single gene testing, right? So if this turnaround time can be given earlier and the cost can be reduced, then you can go for a upfront NGS approach rather than a sequential approach.
Okay. So that's a message for all the laboratories to ensure that they bring down the time taken for generating reports.
Yeah.
So that again as another message for the technologies also to improvise to make sure that you try to get the maximum benefit to the patient in the least amount of time, supporting the oncologists. Yeah. So very, very interesting session, sir. And thank you all. It has been a great session, and I think it was a lot of educational discussion, and many people who were there in this forum are PG students and then young practitioners who wanted to learn from all of you what are your opinions and how things are different in and around different countries across Asia. And a forum like this is always required, and I think we should have more of these so that it brings in some kind of a coherence to this part of the world, that we all follow a similar line of practice, particularly all dealing with Asian patients. So having said this, I would like to thank Dr. Nirmal for moderating this session very efficiently and very what I would say, it has been done really well, as you always do, sir. And I would also like to thank all the panelists here who took time off on a Saturday evening to be here with all of us and share your experience from your countries. And I think this is a great learning for students from all these countries, as well as young practitioners, to learn how lung cancer challenges are, how many different challenges, and how we can, overcome these challenges in your day-to-day practice. So, and also I would like to thank all the attendees here. With that, we would like to take leave, and we wish you all a happy weekend and holidays. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.